All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Georgia Track and Field and Cross Country Coaching Collective podcast. And I'm thrilled today to be joined by Coach Mandy Godbee from Vidalia High School, both boys and girls track and field coach, as well as boys and girls cross country head coach. So, Mandy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. Quite an honor that I was thought of in this conversation. So thank
Of
you.
of
Thank you.
course, of course. Vidalia, obviously, some people it might be a little bit outside of the realm of what they're knowledgeable about in Georgia. So you want to tell us kind of geographically where you guys are located?
We're South Georgia, about 100 miles away from Savannah. Um, Not just, we're kind of out there by ourselves. We're in Toombs County, but Toombs County is a separate high school 6 miles down the road, not too far from Jeff Davis. So
Okay.
we're definitely south. We've moved south.
Yes. Excellent. How long have you been at Vidalia?
We've been at Vidalia for 10 years. We were in East Cobb for 11 years, and my husband was in the military, so we traveled a good bit before that. So, but 10 years here in Vidalia, we are firmly planted.
Yes, I would imagine so. Uh,
Yes.
so tell us a little bit about how you got your start in coaching.
Wow. It goes way back. I'd have to say it probably started in middle school. I've always loved athletics. I was a gymnast growing up, but walking the halls in Stillwater, Oklahoma, junior high school, a coach, Eva Gordon, who I still somewhat stay in contact sometimes, um, kept probing me to come out for track. And when I finally did, his energy, his passion, his, I guess, knowledge of the sport and how he transformed my life kind of pierced me and knew that coaching is a platform that can touch so many. It is a platform that can change lives in so many different directions and taught me how athletics could serve me and I could serve back in the athletic realm. But I think he was the start of it all. He did everything right. He developed relationships. He pushed us. He believed in us. So I think everything started there with coaching, and that's when I knew what I wanted to do. And moving forward after college, I was offered an opportunity to go to Wichita State for a graduate assistant. And I did that briefly. I did not finish it there. But I knew I liked coaching. I liked the younger kids, definitely middle school, high school level. So throughout my career and had three children, three boys, I would volunteer at Walton High School in the track program and I would do conditioning and stuff with several different athletic programs there, a lot of lacrosse players, and knew that I just wanted to be involved in athletics with kids and coaching at some degree. But moving to Vidalia, I was a stay-home mom for 14 years. I moved to Vidalia, have a degree in teaching, and I was asked to go back to teaching. And when I did, it was weeks. And our athletic director called me up and said, "We need a cross-country coach." I said, "I'm not a head coach. I'm not a head coach. I haven't worked in 14 years. This is a bad idea." But his name was Chunk Reed, and nobody told Chunk no. He knew what we needed for our school system, and he kept tracking me down. He kept making phone calls. I kept making excuses, and finally, when I heard that he could be dropping the program that was very well developed, I stepped up. I became the head boys and girls cross country coach, and I volunteered in track and field. I still sometimes think I was a better assistant coach, but I've learned how to juggle being a head coach and develop the relationships that I liked developing as an assistant coach. There's just a lot more. It took a long time to mature into that level of being a head coach, but that's kind of how it all began. A lot of people involved. I had great college coaches. Lonnie Green is now at University of Kentucky, and nobody in the world has his kind of energy at a track meet. So I think that I've learned from the people in the past and the coaches that I've been put in front of and been under what kids need, what kids thrive off of, and the type of energy and systems that they really tune into and develop trust in. So that's kind of how it all began.
All right, great. Well, kind of piggybacking on that,
Yeah.
what would you say? Because at the coaching collective, we're trying to help coaches, whether they're a veteran or a newbie. What would you say to a coach that kind of finds themselves in your position where athletic directors like, hey, we need somebody, like we'd love for you to be the coach, and maybe somebody that's reluctant, but that wants to help out the kids and keep the program going.
My first bit of advice when I stepped in, I thought it was a solo show. I thought I would step in and this is my responsibility. I have to do everything by myself. And the first year I did because I didn't have an assistant coach, but I found a way to go to our athletic director moving forward. And since then, we've got a new athletic director, but we found the funding to add a coach and delegate. My main advice would be to figure out how to delegate and let people help you so that you don't feel overworked, you don't feel burned out. I mean, I don't know if a coach is ever not going to feel overworked, but it's our passion and that's what we jump into. But delegating some of the duties and responsibilities and making sure that everyone on the team and every staff member has the relationships with the kids to where they can thrive and be their best. But delegating is still very hard for me, but I'm getting a little better at it. It makes the job a little more enjoyable.
I can relate to that. My first few years of coaching, I kind of out of necessity had to do a lot on my own, and then as I was fortunate enough to get assistance, had quickly learned like, hey, this is better for everybody if we're all sharing in it together, and nobody's plate is too full. So I
Correct.
yeah,
Correct. So, and I've since then developed just great relationships with all of my assistant coaches. We haven't had that much turnover, but I've got some incredible assistants, especially in track. So that's where I'm very lucky and blessed.
excellent. Well, what have been some of the highlights you feel like with your time in Valdalia?
Gosh, there's been a lot of highlights. I believe it was 2015 when we moved to Vidalia. And I moved here and I was an assistant coach. I was volunteering and had a little girl on the track team that had never run track before. She wanted to run track. And again, under um, I was the assistant coach under Grady Hart. And Courtney Madison stepped onto the track and we thought, gosh, this girl, I think she can almost do anything athletically that we want her to do. Where do we want to put her? And I hurdled. I was a hurdler and a high jumper, and I'm like, let's see what she looks like in the hurdles. We taught her how to hurdle. First year running, she was in the low 14s. The next year, she ran a 14 flat, broke the state record. 2 years in a row, she was an all-time or all high point winner at the state track meet. But just seeing someone come in, no confidence, very shy. I think she cried before her first hurdle race, step up and absolutely blossom and bloom and just thrive in that atmosphere, doing something she didn't know she could do was pretty remarkable to watch her transformation. So it's one of the highlights.
Well, I love that you brought up the hurdles again because I'm a distance coach, but I love all the events, and I'm always curious what kind of athletes the head track coaches are looking for in some of the events. So when you get a new group out, what are you looking for in a potential hurdler? I know maybe somebody that's fearless in terms of getting over the hurdles, but also it could be
Right.
somebody that maybe at first has a little trepidation about that, and you can work with that. Like, what do you look for in a potential hurdler?
Well, we get them out and I can watch them run. I want an athlete that has a good stride, a good natural stride, not someone that's short and choppy, someone that looks like they've got decent hip strength. When you ask them to sprint, they've got a pretty good knee drive because when you start a track season in Vidalia, we kind of start from ground zero. So I want to know what you look like just straight off the street, raw talent. What do you look like? And I look at the kids, they might not be the very fastest on the team, but they've got good knee drive, they've got good work ethic, they're tough, and they've got good speed. I have a hurdler right now that his first time hurdling was in the middle of the season last year. We taught him to hurdle, and within 3 meets, he ran a 39 in the 300 hurdles. great raw speed. He's got decent flexibility. But when I put them on the line, I ask them if they want to. If they say they want a hurdle, let me see what you look like going over a hurdle. And if you have a kid that runs up to the hurdle and completely backs off and bails out, either we give them, we continue to try to see if they can get over that hump. But most of my most successful hurdlers, when I ask them, let me just see you going over a hurdle, they take off running, guns blazing, and they have no fear. Those are the ones that you're just like, okay, we got this. We can
Yeah.
do this. We can work this. And this student that I'm talking about, Jalen, he actually, or Jaden, he actually asked to do the 110s this year, and he's not very tall, so he's a little nervous. Said, okay, let's see what you look like. Look at. So I bunched the hurdles together, said, let's go. Automatically three-step the hurdles. And I moved him back out over, the course of probably 2 or 3 days because we just started our season. And he hasn't hesitated. I don't think he's gone over an interval where he hasn't three-stepped. He's very strong. He's very quick. So I'm actually very anxious about this first meet to see what he does because he's found his event and he's a junior and this is his second year running track. So that's what I've seen in him and I've seen in some of my other hurdlers that very excited to see what's coming.
Yes, I love that when kids find their spot, and they think they're one thing, but then maybe with a little nudge from a coach, like, hey, why don't you try this? And then they
Correct.
fall in love with whether it's
They do.
throws, jumps, hurdles, whatever.
Right, right. I do love that. I do love that. And I kind of went through the same transition when I got to college under my Lonnie Green, who I'd mentioned before. I got to college and I was a hurdler, high jumper, and he said, "I think you'd be a great heptathlete." Never ever had I long jumped, thrown the shot put. I would run the 800 every once in a while because we had a good 4x8 team, and sometimes I was forced to unwillingly, but I did it. And so I do think that you can adapt at any level. I picked it up in college and it was my event. That was my event. I was a heptathlete. So as long as the mindset is willing to adapt, I think we can find everyone's full potential, but you got to trust me and we got to tap into it.
Yes, absolutely. Um, you have a unique perspective coming from Walton, like you mentioned, helping with Walton, and now being outside the metro area in Vidalia. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that experience of being the differences that maybe you see from your perspective.
Right. The first perspective was mind blowing. I had 3 kids that were still in school age at the time. And when we addressed our children, we said, we're going to go to Vidalia. My husband has family here. His parents lived here. And um, it's going to be very different, but we're going to serve. We will be serving this community. Vidalia is an amazing community. We're very tight knit, but it's also pretty poverty stricken. So we went from a nice East Cobb bubble that we absolutely loved and adored to Vidalia. So we lost a lot of resources. We don't have the same type of weight room. We have a 6-lane track and it was completely worn down. We've gotten it resurfaced a couple times since. But when I got to Vidalia and I went to my first track meet, they're like, okay, what event do you want to work? And I looked at the head coach. I'm like, we're working events. And he was like, yeah, we all work events at every track meet. Walton, even when I would go to a Walton High School meet, a JV, even a youth meet, people were running in the events. So I get to Vidalia. Our head coach drives the bus to the meet. We start the meet. They're working a field event. They finish working a field event. We manage the team. We get back on the bus, feed the kids, and we head home. So I was like, oh gosh, okay, this is a lot. And some teams in South Georgia have 1 or 2 coaches for the boys and the girls teams. And to see them manage this is remarkable. At Walton, I saw a lot of community coaches that would come in and do specialty events. Like there was a really great sprints coach and there was a hurdle coach. I came in and helped with hurdles and high jumps sometimes, but mainly in the youth program, the Walton Feeder program. That's where I helped out a good bit. But it was mind-boggling to me that these people, these coaches were juggling so much and doing it so well. So that was an eye-opening experience and it definitely adds to your plate here. And I've experienced that. And since I have become a head coach, I got my CDL. So now I'm driving the bus, I'm volunteering. Track meets are exhausting, but they are just the highlight of the whole season. Every meet is just so exciting to be around.
Yeah. Now, as far as meets go, like, do you guys typically stay local or and only drive up north, maybe for like the state championship, or do you do a variety? What's your approach there?
I try to do a variety. I look at the skill set of the kids I've got coming in. I have a really strong 800 runner, and I've got the hurdler I spoke about before. I've got a triple jumper she should be shooting for 40 feet this year. So I usually try to keep a lot of the meets local, but I find the bigger local meets, and I try not to ever go to a meet that's not electronically timed. I want FIT timing. I want
Right.
my kids to be on mile split. I want them to have the exposure to what we're doing. I want them to know that there are other things out there, and that's how people get to know about them. So I do like to go to a couple Atlanta meets when we can, when we have the funding. One meet that we've always enjoyed going to, and I think it gets my kids some attention, was the Alabama indoor meet. But with the new start dates for GHSA and track and field, Georgia couldn't go to that one this year. So I am on the lookout for something different. My 800 runner ran a 157 last year, and I think he was a sophomore. So I'm hoping to get out there and get him a lot more exposure. And I'm going to probably have to do some postseason stuff, maybe independently with him, and make sure that he's doing what he needs to do to get that recognition and get, because he wants to run in college.
Right. So I think what I'm hearing from you is if there's a new South Georgia coach out there, work with what you have in terms of like facilities and funding. Uh, get creative with delegating if you're blessed enough to have other helping hands. And yeah, it's just all about the kids, like it would be anywhere else.
Absolutely. It is. It is. And there are going to be obstacles everywhere you go.
Mhm.
But I think we're blessed that our athletic director, Tommy Daly, is absolutely amazing. And when I need something and I'm going to advocate for a child, he will find a way. He will find a way to help us get what we need and do what we do. We need sand in our long jump pit. He's going to step up always and help us out and support our kids. And he knows what our kids could do. We've had a superintendent that calls us after every meet and specifically asks me times from the kids. And at a bigger school, I don't think that the superintendent would call the head track coach and ask, "Hey, how did so and so run? What was his time this week?" So those little joys we kind of all celebrate together. I think we're more of a tight knit unit here, which is it's kind of an honorable thing. I love the tight knit, and I love how we learn from each other and feed off of each other. So in
Yes.
support.
Yes. Very good. Now, what would you say are I know this is kind of a open-ended question, but what are your coaching beliefs? Like if you had to talk about your main kind of cornerstones, what comes to mind?
And that was the toughest question for me. There's just so many, and I had to kind of take some notes. The first one is discipline. I want everyone on the same page. I want, before we go into a practice, before we go to a meet, my coaches know this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing. I have a spreadsheet everyone has access to. I have a contract before you're allowed on the team that you need to sign and agree to. I want my kids to be disciplined, and I want them to be accountable to whatever they choose to do. Um, but I also want a foundation relationship with every kid. With our town and our communities, some of our kids have different needs. And we may be the only advocate that they're comfortable coming to. And like, I've had an athlete that didn't have running water and power. And we needed to find a way to take care of that athlete. And he lived like that for a long time before he disclosed it. And, you know, the foundation relationship that this athlete felt like, okay, I think I've got help out there. Someone can help me. When they come to you and you develop that relationship and develop the trust, I think the athlete knows what they can do, not just on the track, but in school and in life. And then the discipline, I want them to learn a discipline that will carry over to make them productive members in society for the rest of their life, not just on the track because we could win if they run well. I want this long term. And I think that's where all of my coaches are as well.
I love that. I think, you know, I think we have such an opportunity to help these kids navigate, not just whatever happens on the track or, in the field events, but like you said, in life and being a good member of society. And sometimes the track part is secondary, of course, to the other more important things, like you mentioned.
Correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. But and I see that a lot, or I see it a good bit here, but I also see this is their safe place. I see our numbers have grown exponentially. This might be the largest team I've had. We're pushing over 70 kids right now, and I won't travel with that many. But for a community as small as we are, we're 1A this year. That's a huge, huge number. So I feel like the relationships are working, and I always feed them too, so that you can get kids to do anything if you feed them. So that's one thing that I feel like we're doing really, really well is we're loving on them, we're building them up, we're encouraging them, and we're believing in them to do something they've never done before.
And, and then they'll do extraordinary things out because of all that foundation. They'll do extraordinary things athletically, as a result of feeling that way, I think. So,
I I believe so. I believe so. Absolutely.
now, what about some challenges? I know, obviously, one challenge I know you guys faced was in the fall with the hurricane, and obviously having to try to navigate a difficult situation. So, I don't know if you want to touch on that or anything else that comes to mind.
Absolutely. The hurricane was a challenge. My husband and I were trying to cut ourselves out of the neighborhood because trees were everywhere and we lost water, obviously, and power, and we had no internet. So my son's a senior in high school and he gets in the car and went as far down the road as he could to check on our head football coach. And he was fine. So they jumped in the car and they tried to navigate around the community to check on some of our kids. When I say we all call them our kids, whether they're football, basketball, track, whatever. So we
Right.
tried to just go see. And when they came back, it was absolutely devastating. We laid eyes on a good number of the kids. Sometimes they had to walk through. I remember going to check on some people and literally climbing over trees to get to them to just check on them. But when the resources started coming in, our head coach, our athletic director, Tommy Daly, would shoot out a mass email. Coaches, get your kids to come do this if they're able. We would go to the airport. We would unload pallets of water. We would deliver them to people. The football team was taking sandwiches to people who couldn't get out. They would walk to places they could to take food and water. So, in the eye of all of that obstacle, our kids who needed to be served were serving others. And I think that's not just a Vidalia High School. I think it's our city. I think we're doing things really well. We're instilling the foundation of what it's like to be a community, and our kids are getting it. So I thought that was a really cool situation in the midst of just absolute devastation. But I think I'm proud of our kids, and I do think that they see us serving and they want to serve in return. And I can't tell you how many texts when I finally did get service. I had so many texts coming through. Coach, are you okay? You okay, coach? Just checking in on you. So, we kind of take care of each other. And there again goes back to the relationship aspect. But
That's incredible. Yeah.
yes, it is. It is. And we have other challenges. We have a 6-lane track, which we spent a ton of money to get resurfaced, and we're so appreciative for it. But with 70 kids, you can imagine the 6-lane track. Would I love an 8-lane track? Yes, because we could host a whole lot of really great track meets, but it's just not what we have. And I know that if we ever had the means to get one, we'll get one, but we don't. So we're thankful that the surface is good, it's a great facility, and we have the support. So these are things that we would love to have. I would love to have a new pair of shoes for my kids. We kind of go out in the community and get training shoes for the kids. A lot of my friends that run will save their older shoes and I hand them out to the kids because they'll come out running in Converse shoes. They cannot go out and buy their own shoes. And I kind of sneak some Amazon purchases my husband doesn't know about to provide for them as well. But that's all part of the deal. I mean, I'm gonna take care of my kids.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, all right. So we mentioned hurdles, we mentioned cross country. Any other particular events that you just get really excited? I'm sure, being head coach, you're invested in all of them, but any other
Yes.
events you want to spotlight?
Oh, as far as my favorite events, Um, I do. I'm like you. I love them all. It's like Christmas. Going to a track meet. It's like, oh, this event's next. This is so exciting. I love high jump. I high jumped as well. And there's just, and I'm 5'8". I'm not built for the high jump. And I've had one of my better jumpers my first couple of years was 5'8", and he was an incredible little tiny little thing. But it's amazing when you get things right, you can jump. It's just a beautiful event, I think. But again, so nobody gets offended, I do love them all. I know I know those sports, or I know those events very, very well. I am that events coach at our high school.
Yes. That makes sense. Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm 800 mile, 2 mile focus, or at least my
Yes.
training group, but I love
Yes.
paying attention to all of them. I get nervous, for the relays because I'm like, just get that slick
Um,
around the track.
yes,
Um,
yes,
um,
yes,
at the four
absolutely.
by one, my 4x8s, we don't have to worry about the exchanges quite as much as those 4x1 athletes, and have to. So, but I enjoy watching all of it, for sure.
Correct. Correct. And I feel you almost forget that nervous energy with the 4x1. We started our handoffs last week after we had our tryouts, and I have a new runner on the 4x1. He's like, oh, he took off too early. I'm like, I don't care if you run an extra 300 meters. You let someone else DQ you and you get that baton around. He's like, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'm like, that's your job. I don't care what it looks like. Get it around the track. So that if you ask me a coaching philosophy, that is definitely one of them. We get that baton around. But that nervous energy came back just in practice yesterday. I'm like, oh yeah, almost forgot about this.
Yeah. Um, just a couple more questions. One, and this is actually a one I just thought of, so sorry I'm putting you on the spot here, but
You're good. Okay.
Coach Shelley Cranford, put a great word in for you, and just talked about how knowledgeable you are, and said you would be a great person to spotlight, which is why we're talking to you today.
Yeah.
Um, and I wonder if there's anyone that has been another coach that's been a help to you, or that you just look at their program, you're like, man, they're doing things really well over there, and just anybody you want to give a shout out to.
Right. Well, Shelley Cranford is just top notch. He's usually my first go-to for rules, for questions, for advice. I just think he's one of the best. But Will Wood has been back and forth in track and field from Jeff Davis. My first or second year living in Vidalia, I believe his girls won state as a team at Jeff Davis. He does a lot right. He's definitely more calm than I am, and he I'm pretty sure we all make fun of me, but he's a great guy. I love his energy. He does things really well all the time, and he's always going to just do things right. So if he's running a track meet, Yeah, we want to go there. He's one of my other go-tos. So I think a lot of Will would.
Yeah, two great coaches. Yeah, but I been able to talk to both of them, and yeah, great guys for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. And the last question is, what is your opinion of the state of track and field in Georgia at the moment? Just kind of, big picture. What do you think?
Right. This was another interesting question because there's a lot of little things I'd love to just briefly touch on, and I don't want to start conflict but I do think that since I've been in both places, this is a great I've got a good perspective of both. When we went to the state track meet last year, we went to East Jackson, and when the coaches got there, they were asking for volunteers. So it was a 3-day track meet. And while we were at state, a tornado went through Vidalia. And my kids were very nervous about their families. Everybody's okay. But I was volunteering on the infield, and one of my assistant coaches was volunteering because not enough people were stepping up. And it was very difficult on us as coaches to step in. And from that point of, I emailed Miss Tanya Anderson at GHSA, and we had an amazing conversation. And from there and from that experience, I was able to share with her some of the challenges that we face as small team coaches. And I think track and field is in a very, very good place for a lot of the bigger schools. But for the smaller schools that have the coaches have to drive to the track meet, they volunteer 3 days in the track meet, then have to load up and drive back home. I'm afraid that we're going to lose really good coaches. Like I'm staying in Vidalia. I'm 50 years old. I'm not going anywhere. I do this because I love it. But coaches that really want a career in track and field, I don't know if they would want to stay in a small town because it's so very taxing on them. And that's my biggest concern. We've got some great athletes coming from the smaller schools, but I hope that we recognize some of the obstacles that we could be putting in place and see if there's a way to help that out going forward so that we could keep coaches that love the sport and want to grow the sport and want to really invest in what they do. So that is one of the concerns. And that conversation I had with her was absolutely amazing. She was so supportive and she listened. And I mean, I had to give a shout out to her because I was thankful that I had the opportunity to very respectfully say, hey, I'm concerned about this. But another concern I have, and growing up in Oklahoma, when we did relays in Oklahoma, relays were worth 20 team points, not 10.
Mhm.
And what I saw, and it might not happen in the larger schools, but in a smaller school, if I have a really good athlete and I've got a couple, I might not spend one of their 4 events in a relay. I might put them in 4 open events so I can score more points. And then my integrity and my time of my relay is going to go down. So the competition in your relays might go down because I'm only going to get 10 points, but I'm spending an event on 4 kids. So it's something I think that could be considered moving forward. I know it's happened in several places in the past, but I do want to maintain the integrity of every single event in the sport. I want I want track and field to be what it is. I want people to fall in love with it like I have, and I think it can change a lot of lives. But those are just 2 little things that I think maybe we could consider moving forward. But as a whole, I think we're doing a pretty good job. I think we're a very competitive state. Um, I see things going really well, but I think we can take care of some of our high school coaches because a lot of times we are the only platform, or where we are, they are. I know in other places that's not necessarily true, but um, I mean, that's up for debate, but I do think that there are things we can fix, and there are many more things, but I'm just saying that's one from a perspective that has stood out to me since being in both places.
No, I think that's great because I think that's one of the reasons why we, at the collective like to talk to people from different places, not just metro area, because different parts of the state have different challenges. And I think you bring up a good
Right.
point. And it might not even be South Georgia. There could be places in North Georgia, wherever, where they small
Right.
staff. Doesn't
Right.
matter where you are in the state. If you have a small staff and you're being asked, if you have a staff of two and then one is being asked to volunteer, well, suddenly you've just cut your staff in half. Uh,
Correct. Correct.
and everybody else, all the other kids, all the kids, all the athletes have that one coach now that's tied up with something. So that brings up a good point that I think not a lot of people might might think about, because some staffs, are able to have multiple people, and so one coach stepping aside isn't maybe as big of a deal.
Correct.
And like you said, if we have knowledgeable people coaching, we want to keep them in coaching. We do not want to run them off.
Correct. 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 And it's hard. It is hard. There's nothing easy. You have to love it to do it.
Yes,
Or you won't, because it's difficult, but it's so rewarding.
yeah, absolutely. And then I'd like that you bring up the because I've heard other people mention too about relays possibly being worth more. And there's so much strategy now, especially with it this year going to a 2 day state meet, so
Oh,
it's not as spread out. And just yeah, like you said, trying to figure out what do I want to prioritize for these four events, for because you don't want to overload a kid, but you're looking at team standing. There's just so much that goes into to all of that.
there is. And I know they're putting all 16 on the track in the 800. So I think that's going to affect our strategy on how we train our 800 runner. And we have to look at the schedule, and we have to start now training them to run the events that we think that they're going to do, so that they're prepared. And even though I have really big numbers, I have to, and very rarely do I have an athlete doing one event. They have to load up. They
Mhm.
just do. I mean, that's that's how we tend to grow and thrive. So I feel like I have to prepare them for that. I have to train them for that. And as hard as it's going to be, I feel like a 2 day meet might end up being a little easier on my kids. But I don't know. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. It's going to be a lot crammed in there, but we'll see what it holds forth. I think it'll be a learning year as well, but we're definitely going to go for it.
Absolutely. And I'm just glad it's not a 1 day meet like I've heard some states have, because I can't imagine that.
No, no, that would be deadly for coaches,
Yeah.
for
Yes.
everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Coach, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an awesome chance to talk to you and learn about Vidalia and your program. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor. I'm flattered that I was invited.
Oh, of course, anytime. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.